Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to The Unspoken Truth. This is our one and only live for the weekend. I'm joined by my fabulous co-host over in Minnesota, Ed Anderson. How are you today, Ed?
Remember, Master and Commander.
Sorry, I got the pronouns wrong, didn't I?
There you go. Be careful. You almost offended me there.
Well, what's happening in Minnesota these days, mate? Anything fun?
Well, you know, weather's pretty good here.
Is it summertime, Ed? Is it wintertime? What's going on?
I am trying to. I've got my two websites going. The sounds is going. I've got. Yeah. No, it's fall and weather's beautiful. Actually, it's nice. I'm thinking about starting to do some reports from local hiking trails. Get my camera out and start doing some reports from the hiking trails.
You got to get outside, mate. Well, maybe we can do some of those lives via YouTube. YouTube's got some really good tools that you can use where you can plug in together you can go live together. So, you know, I'll go out. Well, maybe it would have to be a little bit later in your day because it's still dark o'clock outside for me here in Sydney. But we could go and catch a sunrise in the future here if you wanted to. That could be something that we could plug into and have a little bit of fun with. It's good. Ladies and gentlemen, today on the show, we're going to be talking about the beginning of the end of the USD. This is a huge story, and as I look around my social media feeds this morning and get going with it, I'm not really seeing very much spoken about it, but there's been wars that have been raging over this very issue. The Indian government and the United Arab Emirates have done an oil transaction in USD. Oh my God, when Gaddafi was talking about doing that, suddenly everybody was invading Libya. And then when Saddam was talking about doing that in the early 2000s, everybody invaded Iraq. The whole premise is based on the USD and the petrodollar. And this could be the beginning of the end because nobody's invading India and nobody's invading the UAE, that's for sure. So I'm just wondering where all this is going to be going. And if you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, today is Nuclear War Wednesday, where we look at somebody from around the world who is threatening nuclear war. And the usual suspects are on the list today. It's not Russia today, it's the DPRK. It actually happened on Monday. They came out and threatened nuclear war again. Can you believe it? And I'll show you exactly what's going on there. I believe that is the spark. That's the tinder that's going to be sparked off there, and that will be the beginning of the end of life as we know it on planet Earth. If that actually happens, then the Chinese go as well, all at the same time. This is going to be something that is a catastrophe on a human scale that you just couldn't possibly imagine. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a reminder that these guys are not mucking around at all. So without further ado, Ed, why don't you set the frame for us and let's get into today's show because there's a lot to cover and there's a lot of information that we've got. So why don't you set us up, mate, and let's get into it.
Okay, great. So, now, I don't think that my topic here is going to take too much time, actually, because I want to be kind of, but I do want to touch upon it and keep people abreast of what's going on, because this is an important topic. But it's dangerously boring. But it's critical that people know about this. So let me do the report, and then we'll talk about it afterward.
All right, let's throw straight to that.
More bad news for the US dollar. I will keep this short, I promise. So let's get right into it. Okay, so I am fully aware that many of the economic issues that I cover on my channel are really dry and boring and uninspiring, but they are important. But I do try to keep these kind of videos short and pithy and make my point. And today is one of those videos. This topic may seem very boring and unimportant, but I promise you, it is very important. So let's take a look at an article out of Zero Hedge. Another blow to the petrodollar. India and the UAE complete first oil sale in rupees. In another blow to dollar dominance, India and the United Arab Emirates settled an oil trade without converting the local currencies to dollars for the first time on Monday, as India's top refiner made a payment for oil in rupees. Indian Oil Corp bought 1 million barrels of oil from Abu Dhabi National Oil Company in a dollar-free transaction. Okay, so I'm about to introduce a brand new term for you to know about called the Local Currency Settlement System. In short, it's called the LCS system. The oil sale was the first after the two countries entered a Memorandum of Understanding in July. The deal established the local currency settlement system, facilitated by the Reserve Bank of India and the Central Bank of the United Arab Emirates. The system allows the two countries to engage in bilateral trade using the rupee and the dirham. According to a statement by the Reserve Bank of India, the agreement will facilitate seamless cross-border transactions and payments and foster greater economic cooperation. Okay, so if you want to read this part of the article, I'll let you pause the video and read it. But let's scroll down to here. If the trend of dollarless transactions expands to other countries, the minimization of the dollar in the global oil trade would be bad news for the United States. Okay, so let's cut to the chase. The US dollar is still the world's reserve currency, but that dominance is being eroded on a consistent basis. The US dollar has been the reserve currency in the oil patch for over 50 years, known as the petrodollar, right? Prior to recent history, all oil transactions were settled in the US dollar, and that was very important for America in terms of our dominance in the world. These countries had to have a bunch of US dollars, but that's becoming less and less the case. And in 1 week from now, there's going to be a meeting amongst the BRICS nations to discuss the alternative currency that they want to put together. So in summary, this new development about a transaction that was actually conducted between India and the UAE for oil and settled in rupees is part of this de-dollarization process throughout the world. And what this means for us in America is that more inflation is coming, because as those dollars are not needed anymore overseas to conduct transactions, those dollars are going to come back home, and that's going to create more inflation, maybe even hyperinflation. So once again, reduce your exposure to your bank, get a bunch of your money into gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income. Okay, my lovelies, that's my report for the day. Ed Anderson, live from Minnesota, signing out.
All right, well done, mate. That's a nice, concise report. As you told me that you were going to talk about that earlier this morning as I was getting started and getting organised for today's live, the first thing that came to my mind is this the beginning of the real New World Order?
Well, yeah. Look, this is an ongoing effort, right? You're right. That is what the elites are driving toward. All of these efforts. Now, of course, their big underlying project in order to achieve that is this climate change scandal and scam that they are perpetrating around the world, right? And then, look, there are a few things they need to achieve for the one world order, right? And one of the part of that piece of puzzle is the financial angle. So they want a new monetary system, and they cannot have the US dollar being so dominant. They can't have it be dominant at all. They've got to diminish the importance and the relevance of the US dollar. And this is part of that process. This global de-dollarization process it's all part of that. It's all part of taking America down a peg or two or three. They want everyone to be equal. Right? That's the whole idea behind the big one world. So America right now is too powerful for that NWO project to take hold. They've got to take us down. They've got to reduce us. And that's what this is all about. Sure. No, you're right.
So there was another development that happened over the last couple of days as well. So BRICS Bank raises 1.5 billion rand in first South African bond auction. So, the story says here that the new development bank, a financial institution created by the BRICS bloc of emerging markets, raised 1.5 billion rand at its first ever South African bond auction. And that's why I say, is this the beginning of the real New World Order? And I think the answer to that is, yeah, I think this is where it all starts. And previously we know that the war in Libya, what happened to Libya after we'd been in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, that was to do with oil. Mm-hmm. And if you look closely, very, very closely at what had happened in Iraq the second time around, not the first one when they invaded Kuwait, but in the early 2000s, that was about oil as well, because Saddam was over there, with the French, playing footsies with them, wanting to actually take French francs to actually get going with their transactions. So, no, you don't, Saddam. No, you don't, Gaddafi. But over here, the Americans are not going to say, no, you don't, Modi, and no, you don't, Mr. King of UAE. It's just not going to happen that way. So do you think that we've reached the point in in global geopolitics where there's just nothing that the Americans can do against these countries?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think the real question is, does America want to do anything against? Because
what could they do against the Indians and the Emiratis?
Whew.
You can't sanction the Emiratis because they're exporters of oil as well. You can't sanction the Indians because they're part of the Quad. They're part of the trading partners. We're so deeply embedded with each other. What can you do? And they're just like, all right, sanction us. Go ahead, go.
That's a very good point. Now, let's remember how the U.S. dollar became the dominant petrodollar in the world's reserve currency. Is really largely, if you have to simplify it, I can take it down to the U.S. Navy, right? Because we agreed to guarantee Saudi Arabia's security, right? Hey, we got you covered. Don't worry about
all of that was at the end of World War II. It was a long time ago,
right? So in exchange for that, we just want an agreement that you will only do business with the U.S. dollar. And so our military is largely the foundation, the basis for our economic dominance for the last half century, right? And nowadays, the world is not so important anymore. We don't have two superpowers anymore. The Cold War is over. A lot of the things that were in place then are not around anymore. And a lot of countries are starting to look at each other and say, listen, tell me again why we're using the US dollar for everything, and they can't think of where, but they've been doing it so long that I think it's just an accepted form of conducting international business. Right? It is built into their way of thinking about global finances. And then probably one guy in a moment of clarity in the shower thought, wait a minute, why are we? And other countries now are also saying, wait a minute, why are we? And now we can still flex our muscles. We can still say we still have a lot of influence with most countries in the world. We can still punish them economically in many ways if they do things that we don't want them to do. However, more countries now are becoming emboldened. I think a lot of countries, I think most countries are really letting their resentment be known. And I think they have resented this relationship for an awful long time, but they just didn't say anything about it, because they didn't want to upset the master, right? But now they're feeling a little bolden, and I don't know, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the way it feels to me, that these countries are starting to feel like, hey, you know what? F you, I don't need you. You're not looking out for my best interest, and I've got better ways. So I don't know. So given that, I think it is going to be much harder for America to get these people back in line, so to speak. You know what I mean? I don't want to use that, and I don't want to go down the road that analogy too much because I get in trouble. But I think
you're like the cranky school teacher from the 1960s with the ruler. Fucking do it.
Yeah. And these countries now are starting. They're rebellious teenagers now. Say, well, no, F you. I'm not going to do it. So yeah, I think I think the cast is die here. I think regardless of whether we end up with a powerful BRICS, that's the general trend. That's the way the world is moving to. I think the geopolitical movement is toward a more globalized
I've personally completed transactions like the Indian government has. So there's a service out there called Wise. It used to be called TransferWise. So it's now just called Wise, WISE. And Wise is how you can, so what you can do is just set up a bank account. So you've got a bank account in the country where you live, and whomever you're dealing with on the other side of the transaction, they've got a bank account in the country where they live. And how do you want me to pay you? So I've worked with a lot of freelancers in Romania, in different parts of the world, in the Philippines, in the UK. So I remember working with a dude in the UK. He said, hey, can you just pay me through Wise? That way I can just get pounds straight into my bank account. The transaction happens straight away. And so what I would do is I would make the transaction with my credit card. So I just transfer the money from my bank account to my credit card and then use my credit card. And then the transaction happened instantaneously. And like 10 minutes later, he had the money in his bank. It was So it was really fast. I can't remember if it was 10 minutes, but it was really quick. So essentially, Wise just sit in the middle of it as the intermediary. But I didn't have to change my Aussie dollars into US dollars to pay him in pounds. Like, I just paid him with my credit card in pounds. So he goes, okay, Rob, you need to pay me £200. All right, cool. I do the calculation and say, the calculation on Google right now, the exchange rate, here it is. Are you happy with that? Yep, that looks pretty good to me. Okay, good to go. There, he sends me the invoice, so I pay the invoice. Done deal. There's no transaction. There's no the USD is not the intermediary in there, but the people clipping the ticket there are my bank, the credit card company, because they're charging me interest on that transaction. But I've paid that transaction off instantaneously. So the only thing that I get charged is a bank fee for that transaction, whatever that is, probably a couple of cents. But then Wise are taking a small fee as well. They're just clipping the ticket there in the middle of it, and that's okay too because they're providing the service. You know, typically I could cut Wise out of the picture completely and just go, pass me your IBAN number, pass me your bank account number and your SWIFT codes. And once I've got those details, I can just do an international bank transaction, although that could take up to 7 to 10 days. So that's the difference, right? Well, usually it's instantaneous, like it's usually settled the same day.
Well, you know, we do already have a solution to the modern monetary, to fiat currencies, right? To have to deal with, we got Bitcoin. Bitcoin,
yep, crypto, yeah.
We have crypto in general, but primarily Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the only actual
real crypto,
right? Everything else is not really a cryptocurrency. If you want to get into definitions, crypto is the only actual cryptocurrency. So we do have that, and that's why a lot of countries out there, they freaking hate Bitcoin. You know, because countries do not like competition to their monetary system. They want complete control, and they see Bitcoin as an existential threat. And
have you ever paid anybody in Bitcoin?
Like, I'm going to tell you that in a podcast.
The IRS are coming for you, bro. They're coming for the $9 million in your wallet there.
Yeah. Nice try, my friend.
Good luck with that, you dickheads.
In theory, I could have.
Yeah, in theory, I could have as well, because I've had people say to me, just pay me in Bitcoin if you want. That's easy. We can cut out all that bullshit. And I've actually never done it. I've never had to. I've traded plenty of Bitcoin on exchanges and whatnot, and I've had it, held it, seen it go up and cashed in on the upside of it. I've been short on Bitcoin trades before as well and cashed in on the downside of those transactions. But I've never actually paid something. So what's your wallet address, Ed? And I'll send you $500 worth of Bitcoin. I've never actually done that. So I've only ever traded with it myself. Okay.
So you never actually used Bitcoin as a consumer?
No. I've only ever used it as like an investment vehicle and a way to, you know, I'm buying it, holding it, and waiting for it to go up, or I'm trading with it. You know, it's a tool that I've been using. So it just kind of begs the question then, Ed, as well. Part of the transaction that went on there, and part of so I did a quick Google search, as you told me you were going to talk about that today, and I found a article as well, and there was another development in that transaction. So I'll just read it to you. Another development leading to this transaction involving the sale of 25 kilos of gold worth around 128.4 million rupees or 1.54 million USD by the UAE. And there was a gold transaction in there as well, which I found that was pretty interesting. You know, the reality is that's the way the world's supposed to work, man. You know, that's honestly.
Well, okay, listen. Two consenting parties should be able to conduct business in whatever format they want, right? They shouldn't have to rely on the US dollar in order to be in the middle of the transaction. Any two countries should be able. You're right. That's the way business should be allowed to work. If the two parties, if they want to trade in rubber dog shit, they should be able to do so. Whatever they decide as the medium that they want to do business in, they should be able to do it.
So what do you think has emboldened the Indians and the Emiratis to be able to do that? Like they're kind of getting together. This transaction goes on for months. We need to get clearance from the authorities, from the government, from the treasury, all of these things that are happening. And somebody sitting in the middle, the foreign minister probably going, fuck these guys, man. What are they going to do to us? We've been buying Russian oil the whole time there's been a war. They haven't done anything. We've been fighting with the Chinese, but we're still trading with the Chinese. What are they going to do? Nothing. So is it just we've reached that point in geopolitics where there's literally nothing that the Americans can do, or do you think there will be a response to it?
No, I think there is going to be a response to it, but it's going to be expressed through diplomatic circles. It's not going to be in the press. I think it's going to be let known to them that we're not happy about it, and we might find little ways to punish them, little ways to make life a little annoying for them. But those kind of things are usually not done in public. Those kind of things are done on the ambassadorial level, so when they start doing this kind of a transaction privately and quietly between the two countries, that's one thing. But when you make a press release about it and you boast about it, that is, that kind of sticking a sharp stick in America's eye. But listen, I think what happened is the appropriate finance ministers they dusted off their Japanese calculators and started doing the math. Say, hey, you know how much money we're losing by going that way? If we just do it between us, you know how much money we can save.
Someone's responsible for it, right? And somebody has the responsibility to do the best deal possible for their country, for their department, for the government department that they actually work in. And that level of responsibility has kind of escalated to this point. You're talking about sticking a sharp stick in America's eye. The Indians have been doing that for the last year anyway. And everybody else on planet Earth has been playing ball with it, and you know where I'm going with it. The Indians are continuing to buy Russian oil. And they manufacture that oil into the petroleum products that the world needs, and they offload it mostly into Europe. And the Europeans are buying it. So we're funding the Russian war. Like, stop it. If you were really serious about sanctions, you would just stop all transactions to do with Russia. Oh, but we can't do that because, we can't do that. All right, we'll just stop the things that affect us and accelerate our goals, meaning we're going to stop all fertilizer production coming from Russia, which will accelerate our goals of getting rid of the food supply and getting people to comply with what we want because they'll rely on us for the food. And the oil thing there, man, that's just not reported. That should be shouted from the rooftops every day of the week. And public sentiment should be turned against the Indians if people were serious, if the governments of the world were serious about ending the war with Russia and Ukraine, they would cut the Russians off at their source and stop funding the war. But that's not going to happen. And to your point, Ed, this has never, ever been about land. The Ukrainians are just paying the price for the systematic destruction of the Russian economy. But it's not actually working because the Indians are continuing to prop up the Russian economy. And there's plenty of countries that are going to prop up the Russian economy. It's not going to work.
Well, I've got a theory about why we are not complaining to India about it. All right, so I kind of think about a politician who comes from a district with a very strong opinion on a topic, right? But he knows, okay, this is a really bad policy. This is going to be really bad, but my constituency wants it done. So I'm going to do some counting of the votes, and if I know that the bill is not going to pass, I can still support the bill and look like a hero to my constituency.
Just the optics.
Yeah, just the optics. Right there you go. This is optics. So there he can. He doesn't have to be brave. He doesn't have to worry about So he can support it because he knows it's not going to pass, and he still looks good. So I think I think that in a lot of ways, America is relieved that India is playing this role because,
we can scream and shout from the rooftops that we don't support them buying Russian oil or doing transactions like that, and we can look like we're doing that, but really in the background they're like, whatever, who cares, man? Do whatever you want. We don't give a shit. I want to touch on the hyperinflation thing because people don't really understand that, and it's tricky to understand. And inflation, by its definition, is got to do with supply and demand, and economies being overcooked. So if there's too much money in the economy, people have got lots of cash to spend, so they're going to go and buy stuff. And when they go and buy stuff, if the supply of that stuff, whatever that might be, is not there, the cost of that goes up and the cost of everything goes up. So here in Australia, we have manufactured inflation in the housing market. We have what they call a housing crisis. there's just not enough houses here in Australia because we can't build them fast enough, because we can't bring the materials in here because we don't manufacture anything. So a lot of the materials that we have come from overseas. And then the government wants to import another 500,000 people to Australia and distribute them throughout the country. It doesn't sound like a lot of people, but we're not a very big country, and there's not a lot of space. So where are you going to put those 500,000 people? Well, there's suddenly more demand. Those people have got a pocket full of money when they come here as well, because they're legally allowed to be here. And in order to come here, you have to have a pocket full of money. So they don't mind fronting up and paying 6 months in advance for the rent on that property, because once they've got it, they've got it. And then they can figure out the rest of it as they go. So a quick Google search won't really show you exactly, no one really exactly knows how much US dollars are overseas or held in vaults around the world. But it's estimated that somewhere between 30 and 40% of the US currency supply resides overseas. So it's a large amount of money. So if suddenly the Indians are doing transactions with the Emiratis directly in rupees, and then they're doing it with the dinars, and then suddenly they do it with the Kuwaitis, or they do it with the Persians, or whomever they're doing it with, if all of these transactions are you don't need to do these transactions in USD anymore, all of that money sitting in all of those vaults would just be like, well, let's just send it back to America and buy American products, because we still need to trade with Americans, but let's do it with the physical money that we've got. That money comes home to you guys there in the States, and then all of a sudden everybody seems like, man, look at the economy, it's going off like a firecracker, it looks really good. And it's the stock market is charging, everything is growing. There's these huge demands for everything until that money runs out. And then when that money runs out, and it won't take very long, because countries will come in and just buy assets. They buy large assets, and they're just exchanging that cash that they've got for a hard physical asset and that will drive inflation. But then when those investments all stop, you guys are left holding. It's the aim of musical chairs, man. The music stops, there's only one chair left, and there's like thousands of people that are aiming at that chair. It just won't work. It's a very, very real thing. And that's why, I wrote the question there in the graphic on the screen, why is this such a big thing and will it affect you? The answer is, it is like the beginning of the New World Order. This is the beginning of the end of the death of the US dollar. And this is where another reason for the central banks to say, or the Reserve Bank rather, and the government to say, we need central bank digital currencies. That will prevent all of this. That will prevent hyperinflation. That will prevent. It's just another reason for that to happen. It's just another little dot that's been now joined like that. And that could be part of the reason that you said, Ed, that the congressman who supports the legislation but does the actual marketing to figure out if it's going to work or not goes, nah, it's not going to work, but I'll support it anyway because the optics look good. And that's what's happening here. It's a deliberate and systematic destruction of your economy and your society.
Yeah, I mean, we've several times on our show, we've talked about whether the management of our economy, the really bad management of our it is one of incompetence or design. And
I vote design.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, this is me too. As far as I'm concerned, this is an agenda, because these people can't be that stupid. When you print money, more in the past 3 years, more money was printed than the entire previous 270 years in the history of the country combined. In 2.5 years. It's and there are going to be consequences to that. I mean, and then
how this is by design, Ed. I can highlight this one that we're talking about. So part of the article that you didn't have there in the Zero Hedge article was on the 15th of July. Narendra Modi was in the UAE, and they signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. Hey, let's do the transaction like this. Fuck these guys. And they're going to do the transaction. And so on the 15th of July, they said it, and here we are on the 17th of August, a month and a bit later. And the transaction has happened. There's absolutely no way in this world that the American agencies did not know that was going to actually happen. They knew. They know about the MOU. All of these things are on the public record. It's on the public record in India. It's on the public record in the UAE. And the Americans have done nothing about it. And that's because somebody in the background is saying, just let it go, man. Just let it go. It'll be all right. Don't worry about it. It's okay. And those people that are saying that, there's people behind them saying, this is going to accelerate everything. This is a good thing for us. That's why I think this is, you're asking, is it incompetence or is it by design? It's absolutely 1000% by design. Yep. Nothing like this would happen unless somebody had to say so.
A couple of weeks ago, the Fitch rating service downgraded the American debt, American bond market, and Janet Yellen, she was really insulted that they would downgrade the American financial, who do you think you are? You obviously do not understand our really sophisticated, intelligent, financial planning, so
which is to destroy the economy.
Yeah. She took it really personally, but I think that she's only worried about her reputation. She's not really worried about the result of what she's doing. So this is by design, and the sad thing is, I think they know that they can get away with it because the press is not calling them on any of this. When was the last time you heard any reporter ask a question to the Jean-Pierre, what's her face?
Corinne Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, on a financial issue. When? I don't ever.
Well, even if they did ask the question of her, it doesn't really mean anything. How are you holding them to account? And that's because the people that you think are in charge are just the useful idiots.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, and this is just another example of that. There's no possible way that the Americans did not know about this transaction about to happen. And if the government wants to move quickly, it can move quickly. It kind of just puts me to this final question on this topic before we throw to Nuclear War Wednesday. Have the Indians opened Pandora's box? Like, is that carte blanche now for everybody else to go, well, why are we doing this? We're not buying anything from the Americans here. Why are we using their currency to do the transaction? And they've got away with it. So why on earth wouldn't anyone else get away with it now?
Well, okay. I wouldn't say they've opened Pandora's box. I'd say that Pandora's box has been opened, because this is not the first bilateral transaction to be done this way. China and UAE have already done it. Brazil and Saudi Arabia have already done this. France,
China and Iran have done it as well.
Right. So this is just one more event in the string of bilateral transactions that have been done. So this is just a continuing effort. So no, this Pandora's box has been opened. It is, and this is just continuing efforts of that. So,
do you think the Americans will be able to put the genie back in the bottle?
Well, that assumes that they want to put it back in the bottle. Now, we have people in our government who are globalists. So I don't think that we have patriots in charge of our country. So I don't think they want to. I think we have people who want to bend a knee to the IMF, the World Bank, the WEF, the United Nations. We have most of the people in our government right now are leftists, and this is what they want. They want to take America down a notch. So,
so what I would say to all of this is that the worst case scenario with something like this, if this continues to accelerate and global trade moves to this position, what it will, meaning countries just trading directly with each other without the USD, what that actually means is hyperinflation will eventually take place in the United States. It's just a matter of time before that takes off. And the ultimate hedge against that is exactly that. You know exactly where I'm going with it, right? You know exactly, you can read my mind from a gazillion miles away on the other side of planet Earth via StreamYard. Gold and silver, folks, is the way to protect yourself. So if you buy an ounce of gold today, call it $2,000, $1,900, it's close to that mark there, closer to $2,000. If you lock in $2,000 today and you have hyperinflation run away and the price of gold runs away to $10,000, you're getting that 5x return on that gold now. So it's a really good way to insulate yourself against the negative implication of inflation. You're not going to make money by trading, buying and selling gold and silver today. That's not going to work for you, but it's certainly going to help you in the event that hyperinflation takes off. And in the worst case scenario, there is no hyperinflation, and it doesn't happen, you've just preserved your wealth, because over time the gold price is going up in accordance with CPI, in accordance with inflation. So in 10 years' time, when you've still got those gold coins on your desk, in your drawer and in your safe, they're still going to be worth, you've locked in the value of your currency from 10 years ago when you've purchased it. So, the gold price goes up and down, but it is a really sensible hedge against it. But that's the opportunity in the times of hyperinflation. If you look back at the Weimar Republic and when that went on, people were buying people were buying homes and paying off debt, and they were offloading all sorts of things for. I remember reading a story about a grand piano. Some dude had a grand piano, and someone wanted to come in and buy the grand piano. Yeah, okay, cool. And they're handing over like what in our time would be hundreds of thousands of dollars for this grand piano, but the money's not worth anything. It's just like toilet paper. The guy takes it, goes to the bank, and pays off his house. Because hyperinflation has run away, but the debt that the guy has on his house is still the same as what it was before hyperinflation took hold.
Very
so
good.
If you owe 200 grand on your property right now, and you've got $10,000 worth of gold coins sitting on your desk there, you've got 5 ounces worth of gold sitting there. In hyperinflation times, that $10,000 might be worth $100,000. Go and cash it in, you pay off half your mortgage. Go and offload your car, you pay off the other half of the mortgage. Like there's so many things that you can do to profit from this on the upside. But gold and silver is the ultimate hedge against that, because you just don't know what would be valuable in the times of hyperinflation. It might be toilet paper, it might be coffee, it might be beer, it might be scotch. You don't know what is going to be valuable in those times. But what we know for 1,000% sure is that gold and silver maintain their value, and they will lock in your value, and that's an ultimate hedge against it.
That's exactly right. Before we go over to Nuclear War Wednesday, a quick shout out to all my friends in the Hey Ed WhatsApp group. I've been tracking my YouTube channel, and I've noticed we were up to as high as 12 people at one point watching. Now we're down to 3 people coming in and out during the episode. But I wanted to say hi to you guys, and
welcome everybody. And the $1 billion fund manager got lots of comments there in the comments section there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks so much for your comments and your feedback. It's a bit tricky for us to comment and talk at the same time. I can't do 2 things at once, but I'll certainly reply to those comments after the stream. So we really appreciate your support and the ongoing support that everybody's giving us here in the audience. All right, let's transition to Nuclear War Wednesday. Woo-hoo! Again, let me rearrange the screen. The DPRK and the powers that be are going crazy, and it's all in a response to this, is what I think it is. They haven't really come out and said it's a response to this, but South Korea sets a nationwide or a national-wide civil defense drill citing North Korea's provocations. So if you go away and Google civil defense exercise in South Korea, what it will do is it will show you last year's one from 2022. So it will show you this. So it seems to be that this time every year they're having these types of exercises. It's a once-a-year thing going on. So there's these giant military exercises that are happening in South Korea with all the allies, with the Americans, with the Aussies, with the Japanese, and everybody else that's around there. And one of the things that they're going to do for 20 minutes on the 24th of August, so next week, in a week's time, at 2 p.m., they sound the air raid sirens, and everybody has to get into a bunker. You got to run for the bunker, run for the hills in the event that the North Koreans are actually invading. And when you read the articles about it, that CNN article kind of says something there. It's a bit funny. Like, no one in South Korea takes it. They're like, fuck off, man. I got shit to do. Like, I'm not, fuck you in your bunker and you're stupid. Like, no, I'm not doing that. They haven't taken it seriously, but the government has said, hey, you need to take this seriously because Kim Jong-un is a serious threat and it's actually real. And so let me join the dots here for you and why the North Koreans are saying that. So the boss of the North Korean military says that nuclear war is inevitable. The world is just a step away from a nuclear conflict. That's what he said, just a step away. And he's saying, now the question is not if a nuclear war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, but who starts it when? Like, nobody's starting a nuclear war, you dickhead. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? The only people wanting to start a nuclear war is them. So remember, folks, that the North Koreans have been watching us for the last century. They know how we play this game. They know that before we invade or before we threaten anybody else, that we encircle and we get all of our logistics in place before we go and invade. But because South Korea is a small place and there's nowhere to position your logistics and there's nowhere to do it, they're worried that aircraft carriers and long-range strike aircraft and long-range bombers are going to attack them. And they've cited several times saying that the US, which has been waging a hostile state policy against North Korea for 80 years, blatantly interferes with the independent development and security interests of the North and pushes the situation in the Northeastern Asian region to the brink of nuclear war. So they're blaming us for their rhetoric. But the reality is, they're worried that we're surrounding them, that because we can't move forces and logistics into place, all we can do is surround the peninsula. And every time there's an exercise, the North Koreans are so on such a hair trigger, they're worried that this is actually going to be the time when the bastard Americans invade us. And that's what they refer to you as in all of their propaganda. And I want to remind you folks that this is a real thing. So this happened actually on Monday. It's not Nuclear War Wednesday, but it's kind of fun to say it on a Wednesday, but it happened on Monday. I want to remind you just of a couple of pictures. And the first one I want to show you is this one. So this came out about 18 months ago, where Kim is walking around and he's got his hand on the nukes there. And if you look in the picture, there's about a dozen warheads that are there. And yesterday we saw the living deity himself at a factory. Yeah, so he's sitting inside the front of the Chinese truck that he's been given. And these are the short-range ballistic missiles. So when these pictures came out a couple of months ago, or a year or so ago, everyone's like, okay, cool, he's got these small warheads. What's he going to mount them on? So you've got the equipment now to actually do it. So we saw in the parade that happened just a week or so ago, a little bit more than 10 days ago now, that they had a whole bunch of equipment that we haven't seen before. And these cruise missiles, these canister-launched cruise missiles, now appear to be the right type of weapon system to deliver these tactical nukes. And, you know, is there such a thing as a tactical nuclear weapon? No, all the things are strategic weapons, but that's how you would define it. It's like a battlefield nuke, right? It's like 50 JDAMs going off all at once. That's exactly what you would describe. And part of the reason you need to take this Nuclear War Wednesday rhetoric seriously is because they're building a huge capability. And what you can't see in this picture, because I cropped it a little bit, is it's like probably 3 times the size of that. They've got a lot of capability, and it looks to me like all of these tactical warheads are now potentially mounted inside of these weapon systems. But equally, I look at this picture, and can you see what's wrong with the picture, Ed?
Not
really.
Is this a Where's Waldo question?
Yeah, kind of. So not really. It's a deliberately ambiguous question. The minute I say it, you go, yeah, of course. So you can see that they're inside what looks like a warehouse or something, or some sort of manufacturing facility. But you can see the sky, so we know exactly where this stuff is. So we're looking down on North Korea all day long, all night long, with satellites, looking at the disposition of their forces. And the minute that they mobilize their forces, we know exactly where all of them go, because we can see that, we can track that from space, and we can see exactly how many of them there are as well. So by that rationale, you've got to take seriously what Kim is actually saying, because he's got this capability. We know where it is, and it's going to take us time to get at it. And if we were going to get at it, he could potentially launch it before we could get there. So I want to show you some other photos to help you to understand how serious it actually is. So we know he's got these tactical warheads, but we also know that he's got a bunch of strategic missiles as well. And we know that if he fires more than 7 of these at the United States, it will saturate the current missile defense system, because that's all it's able to actually handle. It takes 7 missiles to take down 1 ICBM, and there's only 49 missiles in the arsenal to actually do it. And when you look here, here's his ICBMs. So this photo is from, I think, a year or so ago as well, but people just need to be reminded of this stuff. He's threatening nuclear war. And if you're looking at what's going on here, it didn't take very long for him to join the dots between these tactical warheads and these vehicles that have the missiles on them that those tactical warheads are mounted on. So it's not going to take very long from 18 months or 2 years ago, when this actually was, to when they actually mounting so this is the launcher, and here is the re-entry vehicle right here. Yeah, that's what gets it into space. That's what pushes it over the atmosphere in a ballistic trajectory. And here are the warheads that actually go. That's the MRF, the re-entry warhead there. And how many nukes are on the inside of each one of those warheads? We just don't know. It's hard to say. So you've got to take this guy seriously when he's threatening America, because there's more than 7 missiles there. And we've seen more than 7 missiles on parade before. So this looks to me like he has the capability. This also looks to me like he has the capability to mount those tactical warheads into these vehicles on these trucks. So when he talks about, you come back here and say, we're only 1 step away from the inevitable nuclear war, I'm just scratching my head going, what the hell? The really strange thing about all of this, when you go and look for all of these photos, and I look on the North Korean propaganda, because they put it out there, it's all there for you to see. It's not somebody making these things up in Photoshop, it's real. One really strange thing, he's always holding hands with his daughter, having daddy-daughter time, and she's inspecting these nuclear facilities with him and going and doing all this stuff together. It's really quite strange. And you know, is this a real thing? Is this a threat? You know, what should you do about it? What can you do about it? I think the predominant thing that you can do on Nuclear War Wednesday, when you hear this rhetoric coming out of these crazy people in North Korea, is whatever you do, don't trust anything that any politician says. Ignore everything that they say and do the opposite, because they're going to say to you, it's all right, it's all good. They don't want to create panic. They don't want to create calm. But the reality is it's not all right and it's not all good, because North Korea really think that we're going to invade them. They think that they're going to be invaded. They think that the West wants to take them down and get rid of his regime and to get rid of them completely. That's what they think. And that's the whole premise and the whole reason that they've got nuclear weapons. And his father, Kim Jong-il, he's the one who Kim Il-sung came out and said, the reason that we're having these nuclear weapons is so you're never going to get rid of our dynasty. That's never going away. We are the living gods, the deities of North Korea, and we will never be removed from power, ever, never, ever. And the whole reason they have nuclear weapons is because of that. So when your government comes out and says, there's nothing to worry about, it won't do anything, nothing will happen. If you think if a nuke goes off on the Korean Peninsula, it won't affect you, you're wrong. It'll destroy the stock market, it will destroy public sentiment as you know it, and it will change the world forever. It's crazy, man.
Okay, so as I'm visualizing his neighborhood, I guess his first targets would be South Korea, Japan, Guam, Hawaii.
Diego Garcia.
Where?
Diego Garcia, the airbase there as well.
Yep.
Hawaii.
I don't know. You know, I kind of don't worry about this, Robbie. I got to confess. This guy.
You're all good in Minnesota, even though the missile silos are just down the road.
That's right. I'm all good. You know, a couple hours drive north, or if I have to, I'll get a horse and ride. You know, I got a lot of open land, a lot of wilderness just north of me.
You'll be right in the lakes.
Yeah. But listen, I don't know what I mean, in his situation, I can kind of see Putin, right? Because his borders are right there, and NATO, and given what NATO's doing, I can see Putin playing that out in his head. Hey, if they get into Crimea, they're right on my border. I can see him making. I can understand him, but with this guy here, Kim, outside of paranoia, he doesn't have anything to worry about. And
that's why it was so important that Donald Trump spoke to him. That's why that was so important.
Okay, yeah. And I think we both agree that North Korea doesn't do anything without China's permission, right?
Yeah, I think you're right there, but I also think the way you describe it is they're a vassal state of China, because they can't do anything without the Chinese, and the Chinese could cut them off and it'd all go away. And they're an instrument of the Chinese government for sure. I completely agree with that. But equally, I think that their rhetoric is their own. I don't think I don't think Xi Jinping's ringing up Kim Jong Un and going, "Hey, now I want you to say this."
Okay, all right, but listen, but short of an invasion, there's no upside to him launching nuclear missiles. Only downside, right? So,
that's what I'm saying. The whole reason they think that they're threatened. It's an existential threat, and the Americans are going to invade us. That's the propaganda that comes from it.
Yeah, but how long does it take to launch a nuclear missile? A matter of minutes, right? If he really wanted to. So I don't see him launching missiles unless we actually do attack. And I don't see us attacking North Korea. I don't think we give a flying squirrel about North Korea. I think I doubt that we spend a whole lot of time thinking about North Korea. Maybe
most people couldn't point at it on a map.
And I don't know. We talked about this during the big parade. I think that's his big motivation. Talking about nuclear war is he wants attention. This is how this guy. This is his greatest form of GDP for the company is extortion money from saying, "Hey, I've got nuclear weapons," and we throw money at them somehow to, I don't know, keep them away from the button. But I think so. I get the sense this guy is just feeling a little left out on the world stage, and this is his way of staying relevant on the world stage.
Yeah, I could definitely see how you would say that. When you read between the lines of the propaganda, it's a little bit deeper and a bit more nuanced, though. And the nuance of it is that it's not so much about their relevance; it's about their survival and the history. And they're so brainwashed by the dynasty that they are the living gods that saved them from the world. And all you got to do is listen to some of the defectors in the way that they're brought up and the things that they're the things that they're supposed to believe that are just not true. And what they suffer from is not so much the relevance, Ed, it's the paranoia.
Yeah.
And they're worried that the Americans are going to invade, and they're worried that their way of life is going to go away. And so because their military has been watching our military forever, they know exactly how we build up. We're surrounding these places before we get going and before we go in. And so they're like, "You're surrounding us again. Are you going to come in here?" And they're genuinely worried. They're genuinely paranoid. When you read the propaganda and you listen to their news reports about what they're saying, it's the bastard Americans are coming for us again, and we need to prepare for war. And the whole reason that there's all this suffering in our society is because we're getting ready for war. We're getting ready to go up against them. And the leadership of North Korea is like, well, we can't fight them conventionally. The only way we could beat them is with nuclear weapons. And that was the genesis of their program.
But
and today it's the evolution of that is where it is. Are they ever going to fire a missile? I think the starting gun is fired by them. And when you say they won't do anything without the Chinese's approval, I kind of get it. And the Chinese are supplying them with everything. I agree with that. But I also agree that you're dealing with a crazy person, man, who literally thinks he's a god. And I'm not saying that in jest. That's what North Koreans believe. They believe that he's the actual embodiment of God on earth, and he is their god. And he has the power of a god with nuclear weapons. So in my view, is there a 50-50 chance of him launching a nuke? Well, I think it's more like a 90-10 chance of them starting a fight. And if you get a little bit too close or you're encroaching on their space, you're in their personal bubble, they're not going to like it. And they'll launch against Guam, they'll launch against Diego Garcia and Hawaii and Japan.
Okay. So let me ask you kind of a 30,000-foot question there on this topic. From a purely practical point of view, as far as why should we care? What if they launched a missile or two and it hit a couple places? Maybe it hit Japan, maybe it hit South Korea, and then they realized we didn't counter. We said we'll take our lumps, and then that we're in. So we got, say, two atomic events. Japan. Well, let's not pick on Japan. Japan already.
Let's pick on Guam.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So let's say South Korea and Guam. Okay. So those are the two nuclear events. So
what happens is what you're saying?
Yeah.
What?
How do our lives look from that event?
Well, it's a really good question. And I'm glad that you raised it, because why should you care is the question. Well, if something like that happened, it would destroy the economy as you know it. That's the first thing. The economy would be completely destroyed and completely decimated if that was the case. And so the North Korean economy, that is, and the South Korean economy they'd go away, and it would embolden the Chinese, because the Chinese see that as a giant distraction to go after Taiwan. And that's actually where I think it might actually kick off proper. That's how it actually happens, is the Chinese get you tied up in a conflict over there with North Korea, and there's nothing that you can do to fight back against the Taiwanese or the Chinese invasion of Taiwan. That's how this plays out. If you were a Chinese general, what would you do? You would create a massive distraction, and the distraction is to the south, and you don't care what happens to the North Koreans because they're just a vassal state of you anyway. You don't really care about the South Koreans either because they're the enemy. Then off you go. You can go back and take back your Taiwanese island and your land and do everything that you want to do in relation to that. That's where I think it is.
Okay.
Let me close the thought.
Yeah.
This is why I think you should care, because the North Korean satellite, the KMS-4, that is in a orbit that comes from south to north over the continental United States a couple of times a week, that is apparently a weather satellite which has never transmitted ever. So the only thing that could be is an EMP, a nuclear EMP. And it is at the exact height, if that EMP goes off, it will turn the power off in more than 3/4 of the continental United States. So one nuke in space will turn all the power off and will fry everything. That's why you should care about it.
Okay.
And are you ever going to be attacked with a ground burst like a Terminator movie? Maybe, yeah. Diego Garcia, Guam, some of the air bases or the military bases in Japan as well, because they're the things that are directly threatening them, and certainly South Korean airstrips and air bases and their military installations, for sure, they are nuclear targets. But the thing that affects everyday Americans is the EMP. And if that EMP goes off over the United States, even if it's only a quarter of as good as what they say it is or what it could be, that's a really big problem, man. And if the power went off and it destroyed the electrical infrastructure of a quarter of the country, that would be a catastrophe for the United States.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this question, another theoretical. Is it possible for there to be a limited nuclear strike? What I mean by that, let's say Putin got really pissed off. He got scared, NATO attacked Crimea, and he said, fuck that, man. He launches one nuke, I don't know, at Poland, say, and there's more coming if you don't stop. Do you think that's possible? Or as soon as one nuclear bomb goes off, they all start going, and
that's the fear, right?
And the computers kick in, and the AI takes over, and
that's the fear. And you've heard that before, a limited nuclear exchange. I think a limited nuclear exchange means between like India and Pakistan, and China and India. It's like it's not like we're destroying the entire world. So remember, there's two doctrines that the Americans have, and it's very similar to the Russians. But the Russian doctrine is to wipe out everything and to destroy everything. And the first doctrine the Americans have, so if the Russians launched a nuke, what would actually happen is the Americans would go after all of their nuclear facilities with other nuclear weapons. And they could do that within like a 15 to 30 minute time frame. It's pretty quick. And they do that with all the submarines that are deployed and all the forward deployed weapon systems that are there. And then the second strike is to get rid of the infrastructure that can actually continues the military industrial complex in Russia. And that's the complete destruction of society. And that's where you see like that nuclear exchange, as you would imagine in a Hollywood movie type thing. But would there ever be a limited nuclear exchange? I don't think so. I think the way that ladder of escalation goes is the Russians move to a nuclear test with a 100 kiloton bomb and go, see that? Remember that Tsar bomber thing? This one's twice as big. Yeah, we got one for you. If you don't stop fucking around, you're going to wear that. Yeah. But the threat of that rhetoric, and if they went and actually did something like that, would escalate this to a level where the Americans would probably see a first strike as no other option. And that first strike would just absolutely, completely, and totally decimate planet Earth as you know it. And it would just the scale of the radiation and the fallout, not to mention the destruction that it causes, is just beyond what you could possibly think. What I'll do is after this live, I'll post a couple of links to some videos that give you some graphics of how the nuclear response actually looks. Some of these videos go for about 20 minutes. One of them goes for about an hour, and it shows you the entire response from the American arsenal. And it is maybe the most sinister and chilling video you'll see this week. Yep. Because if that's actually what would happen, you just think, what would life look like after that?
I've seen the video that you're talking about.
Yeah, you know the ones I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, okay, so one last question I have for you from an amateur point of view. Okay, so these drills that they're holding in South Korea with the little masks, and I mean, come on. It reminds me of the duck and cover, exercise we had.
Get into the gutter and turn away from it.
Yeah, and you're all good. Yeah, just dive under the desk at school, and you're good. I mean, come on.
The 1,000 degrees that, it's hotter than the sun when it goes off. So you'll be right, man. Just go duck and cover.
I mean, these people in Seoul with their masks.
I think that's why those people don't take it seriously, right? They're like, really? What are you talking about? But fallout is a real thing, right? And if you think of the the North Koreans' technological capability, we don't really know how advanced their weapon systems are. And we certainly don't know how big their nukes are. They say, we've got hydrogen bombs. Well, do you? Or are they just atomic bombs? We don't know, because it seems like your capability is pretty small, and the testing that you've done in the past seems like they're pretty small, low-yield weapons. So that says to me, if you've got a small, low-yield weapon, the thing that you're using that for is a ground burst. And that is a really big problem, right? Because as soon as that nuclear explosion hits the ground, that's when you have the fallout problem, because the blast of the nuke sends everything up into the air, including and everything's radiated, and then it falls down on you, right? So no little pissy mask like you see in that picture is going to save you from anything.
I do. I would like to float out a request worldwide to our worldwide audience, if you don't mind. So if we have any billionaires listening to the program, and you have one of those bunkers in Montana that's designed to people live in for 20 years, let me know. Okay, I'd like to talk. So
I researched a fair bit about fallout and what actually happens and where you would be, because I've thought often about what would Australia ever be a target, and anywhere on planet Earth that has an international airport is a target. If you live in a city that has an international airport, there's a hydrogen bomb pointed at your head right now. And that's because international airports have really long runways for cargo planes and airliners, and they're really useful for Air Force planes that have the capability to fight back. So one of the doctrines is to get rid of all of the military installations, which includes all of the civilian airports all at once. And when I look at the geography of where I live, in the southern part of Sydney, would we be affected here? Well, it depends how big the bomb was that they dropped on us. Would they ever drop a bomb in the middle of Sydney? Probably not. But they might drop one on Richmond Air Base to take out Richmond Air Force Base, and then the Air Force headquarters, which is just like a couple of kilometres away up the road in Katoomba. Then they'd take out Canberra as well, like the centres of gravity, the centres of power. If they took out Canberra, the prevailing winds here in New South Wales are southerly, so we could be in the fallout cloud from somewhere like that. So, what would you do? And I thought to myself, how do you get away from that? What do you need to protect yourself from that? And so I've done quite a bit of research about what is known about that. And in that process, you end up down the track of Chernobyl, you go down the track of Fukushima, and you find out about how they dealt with it, what happened to those people, and what fallout is. And it's actually not as bad as what you think. And you will survive. People think that nuclear war is like a Terminator movie where everybody gets vaporized from the blast. Well, yeah, if you're near the blast, you're going to get vaporized and everything's going to be destroyed. But the reality is most people will survive a nuclear war.
And Hiroshima is a beautiful city.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
did you go to Nagasaki as well? Have you been there as well?
I've been to Hiroshima. I haven't been to Nagasaki. No.
So Nagasaki was the second target, if you remember. And when you look at Nagasaki, it's on the very bottom of Japan, and there's a river that leads into it. I went there when I was in the Navy, and the warship drives all the way up the river, and you park alongside. But around Nagasaki is mountains, so it's like a kind of a mountain range. They're not very high. I can't even remember how high they are. But when you're in the city, you look up and you can see the mountains on the horizon around where it is. And the industrial area of Japan, where all of their military machine came from, their complex came from, is there. And they dropped the bomb in the middle of Nagasaki, and the bomb just kind of went like that up the hills and just wiped out everything that was there. It was like a very strategic target, and it was a very strategic way to use an atomic bomb to actually do that. In Hiroshima, they didn't do that. They just targeted the bridge, right? And they hit the bridge and landed on its target, and then it just wiped out the city, because the city was just made of sticks and wood.
Actually, they
missed it. They missed a little bit.
Yeah, they missed it, but it didn't matter because
it didn't matter because it was a nuke.
The destruction was exactly. Yeah. Damn it, we missed it. You missed it by 100 yards.
Close enough is good enough for government work. I'd say that's what it is.
Good enough for government work and nuclear bombs.
So let's close it out with this. What should you do about it? Well, what you should do about it is just read some books. Yeah, go and look at the history of what happens when there is a nuclear incident. 3 Mile Island is another good one. All of these things are on, you can watch all of these things on streaming TV. There's a really great doco about 3 Mile Island, how they had to evacuate there and what happened. There's a great show about Fukushima that shows you what happened there as well, and how it escalated, and how those folks weren't really ready for it. It's actually really, really good dramatization of it. And of course, there's the show about Chernobyl and how those poor people were just sacrificed into the machine. But in Chernobyl, they do a really good job of showing you what happens when people get sick from radiation and how that happens. And there's plenty of books out there about radiation sickness and nuclear war survival and whatnot as well. The thing to know about this is that you can absolutely survive this. You will survive a nuclear war. If you're not vaporized in the blast, you'll survive. And the nukes are not as big as what you think. You're led to believe that this thing is going to just destroy everything within a 50-kilometer radius. The reality is it's just not true. They're not as big as what you think. Even at an airburst, at 15,000 feet, it creates a giant overpressure and creates a big footprint on the ground. There's no radiation from the airburst. There's nothing, because the nuke doesn't go off on the ground, so the radiation is dispensed in the air. So when they fire a hydrogen bomb, it is not very effective for it to hit the ground. It's only effective when it goes off in the atmosphere at 12 or 15,000 feet and creates that overpressure to destroy everything. And it creates a big footprint on the ground for sure, but there is no radiation. So if you survive that blast, you'll survive the nuclear war. But if there are ground bursts in your local area because there are military installations or international airports, and that's what they use the ground burst for, then you have to know how to survive the radiation. So that's what you got to do about it, right? And it's a matter of covering yourself up. It's a matter of scrubbing down, and it's a matter of getting out of all the clothes that you're in and getting that off your skin and getting it away from you. And then to be able to identify if you've got some radiation sickness, what happens to you and how you're feeling about all of that. It's not very pleasant. It's not a pleasant way to go, especially if you have a high dose of it as well, because it just shuts your organs down from the inside out. It's a very nasty way. But you can learn all that before that actually happens. And, will it ever happen in the United States? Hopefully not. If the EMP goes off and the power goes off, you're in big trouble. You got to do something about that. So you got to be ready for something like that, is the way that I describe that.
Toilet paper and whiskey.
They're going to be the commodities that people will want to trade you for. Yeah,
that's right.
I'm going to add one in there, and I'm going to say coffee, man. I'm going to be fighting hard for that as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on the live today. We really appreciate your support. Thanks for all your comments. And don't forget, we're available as a podcast over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. And we're also on Twitter, Telegram, and Rumble. Come on over to the Telegram channel and join us over there, because there's lots of posts in there. You can comment on there, and we're posting about a range of different things related to the unspoken truth and showing you behind the curtain of what's really going on in the mainstream media. And I'm just sharing a whole bunch of content from my social feeds that you may not have seen. It's really useful because I'm plugged into it and I'm doing this stuff all day long. Ed, have you got any parting remarks as we close it out today?
Just please hit the like button, and God save the Queen.
God save the Queen. All right, everyone, we'll see you next week on the live, and we'll be back tomorrow with some pre-recorded stuff. Bye for now.